Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm here to bring you a haul video. So I originally was going to do a library haul because I got quite a few books from the library, but then I realized that I also bought a bunch of books on Book Outlet for my birthday, and then I also realized I had books on my shelf that I never hauled for you guys, so I just decided to make this a Book Outlet library, just general books in general haul. There are a lot of books I have to show you, and so yeah, without further ado, I guess let's just get into it. So the first book I'm going to show you is one that I bought, I don't even know how long ago. Some of these have been on my shelf for quite a while, and I just never pulled them aside to do a haul video. This is the case. And that was, or is, A Torch Against the Night by Sabathir. I got this book for 50 cents at a yard sale. Well, it was like a yard sale benefiting the Humane Society, and when I got there they were doing like a half off deal of all of their books, so this book would have only been $1 to begin with, but 50 cents! You cannot beat that. I've already read this book. I have a spoiler-free review for it. We'll have that link down below, and I will have the same link down below for any of these that have reviews, but this book was so good, and I was so happy to find a nice hardcover for only 50 cents. So the next two books I found at Goodwill, each for $1, so I can't complain. And those are City of Bones and City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. I originally got City of Bones from the library and I read it, and it was alright. I liked it enough to want to get my own copy and to continue the series. And when I found City of Ashes for only $1, I had to pick it up, and I was like, okay, so that's cool. I've decided that I'm going to just start slowly collecting the series as I find them cheap at Goodwill or wherever. And when I went back to Goodwill, I happened to find a City of Bones. So I was like, that works out, because they're also in the same edition. They're also both in paperback, and they're also both in fairly good condition. I really can't complain too much. If you guys don't know what the series is about, then I feel like I'm like one of the last ones to read it on BookTube. But this follows just, I don't even know how to describe this series. Demons and shadow hunters who are people who hunt demons, and it's a good story. It's not the best, but this was the first book. I've heard it gets better as it goes on. We shall see. So I'm going to show you all the library books I got next. Obviously these are going to have to be returned back to the library at some point, so they will be out of my possession, which makes me sad for some of these. So the first book I found at the library that I was just like, I immediately grabbed, I was like, I gotta read this, is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. It was so good. I know this book is everywhere on BookTube, and it is hyped up to an unimaginable level right now, but it is for a good reason. It is just fantastic. So the next book is also a fairly new release, and it is also super hyped on BookTube right now. I haven't read it yet, but I did read A Gentleman's Guide. But the book I'm talking about is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. So I really don't know too much about this book other than it follows a girl who has a really popular webcomic series, I think, but she doesn't really fit in her high school in real life, and then she meets a boy who's like the absolute most like biggest fan of her webcomic series, and it's like coming of age, growing story, like that type of thing, I think. I've heard really good things about it. I'm looking forward to picking it up, and I was happy to find it at my library. So I realized that the next four are actually nonfiction, and one of them, which I am currently reading, is Temples, Tombs, and Hieroglyphs by Barbara Mertz. She is also the author of the Amelia Peabody series, although she wrote that as Elizabeth Peters. I haven't read that series, but I know they're like mystery novels, and I've heard people talk about them before. Don't know really what they're about, but this book is a nonfiction book that is just the popular history, it says, of ancient Egypt, and it is really just that. I am about halfway through. There are times when it's kind of boring, and there's a lot of names that just kind of get confusing because they're all like not very far off from each other. Some of them are like really long names that have only like 1 or 2 letters changed, and they're completely different people at completely different times, and it's just a little much. And honestly, some of these names are just really long, and so I just kind of skim them. But other than that, it is good. And I will say that compared to other texts I've read on this topic and other texts I've read on history in general, I do find that she writes in a way that is very approachable because it is the popular history. If you've ever wanted to know how the various pharaohs came into power, how long they were in power for, how they got disposed, how the pyramids were erected, and all this kind of stuff, she briefly covers pretty much everything from what I can tell. Like I said, I'm only about halfway through, but it is interesting enough, and she's got a very sarcastic and witty sense of humor, and it really comes through. So if you are interested in learning more about ancient Egypt, I would definitely recommend this. It was originally published in 64, 65. However, she revised it back in 2007, I think. So this, I don't know how accurate the information is. I don't know if they've discovered anything super recently since in the last like 7 years. However, that's not even in the last 10 years, Cheryl. Oof. It's not 2014. But overall, if you're interested in the history of Egypt, I would recommend this one. So the next book I picked up because I heard Emily from Possibly Literate talk about it, and that is The Emperor of All Maladies, a biography of cancer. But I'm just gonna butcher that name if I try it. I know that it's like I'm a bad booktuber for not like saying the name, but it would butcher it. I really don't know much about this book other than it does talk about like the history of cancer, the disease, and according to Emily, it's written in a way that's almost like cancer is telling the story, or a cancer is a person. I'm not quite sure, because obviously I haven't picked up this one yet, but it sounds really interesting, and this cover is really cool, and I need to read more nonfiction, and she talked pretty highly about it, so I'm interested to pick this up at some point. So the next two are ones my fiance actually picked out. I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to read this next one, and I know I'm probably not going to read the last one, but I'll show it to you anyway, because it's sitting next to me. And this first one is Devoured, From Chicken Wings to Kale Smoothies, How What We Eat Defines Who We Are by Sophie Egan. Now, if you guys don't know, one of my like favorite things to read, especially nonfiction, is about food and like the history of food, and like I've read Omnivore's Dilemma, I've read Food Inc., all those kind of things. I don't know what it is about those books, but they really interest me. And so when he found this and was like, this sounds interesting, and picked it up, I was like, ooh, I'll probably read that, because it really does sound interesting. I really don't know much about it, except for what the title and the extended title says. But yeah, I'm looking forward to picking this up because, like I said, I need to read more nonfiction anyway. And yeah, it sounds interesting at least. So this last one, like I said, I can almost guarantee I won't read. It is like a big coffee table book, but my fiance picked it up because he was interested in it. And that is horror cinema. It is basically just talks about all of the different horror cinema. Wow. I know this is a book channel, but cinema's in the title, Cheryl. So this just talks about all of like the really famous horror movies. Obviously this is from The Shining, which I have seen even though I haven't seen a lot of movies. And I mean, I'm sure I'd be interested in this. I really do like horror novels and I really do like horror movies. I just recently saw The Thing for the first time, both the original and then we watched the prequel remake type thing the next night. The first one is fantastic. The second one, not so much. But I need to watch more horror movies, like especially the original iconic ones, but I know there's also a shocking lack of good horror movies out, but I'm rambling way too much. This book, I mean, so yeah, I think it just talks about the various, like, super popular movies and, like, the makings of them, maybe some small facts about them. I'd like to pick this up at some point because it does sound interesting. I just don't know if I'll get to it by the time I have to return these books. So the last stack I have to show you, and honestly the ones I'm most interested and excited about, are the books I got from Book Outlet. Now, it was my birthday one Friday ago. My time is all off. So I made my way over to Book Outlet, looked to see what kind of good deals they had, and ended up getting 7 different books. And so yeah, let's just get to it. Now, 3 of these and the first 3 I'm going to show you are from the same series. And these are the next 3 books in the Wordstone Chronicle series. I have the first 2 and a bind up, but I didn't have 3, 4, or 5. And so that is, book number 3 is Night of the Soul Stealer. Book number 4 is Attack of the Fiend. And book number 5 is Wrath of the Blood Eye. So I'm like really excited to have these in my collection, especially because they're all paperback, they all match. And they're in a really good condition, even though they were all like $3 a piece, I think. And they have the illustrations in them, even though they're not hardcover. I'm just excited to have these in my collection so I can reread them without having to go to the library. And I also didn't feel bad about buying those because I've already read them. And that is the same with this next one, which is Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This is the second book in the Lunar Chronicle series. I've actually read this entire series with the exception of the novellas. But for some reason I only owned Cinder because I don't know. Whenever I was going to Barnes & Noble and I only could afford to buy like 1 book or 1 or 2 books, I didn't want to buy a book I already had, especially full price. I wanted to buy a book I was excited about or one I hadn't read yet, and so I would always pick up something else. But then I saw this on Book Outlet for really cheap, and I was like, I've got to continue collecting the series, especially because this is the floppy paperback. Well, not floppy, but it is the paperback, and I have Cinder in a paperback too. Not that that really matters, but aesthetics. So this was actually my favorite of the series. I know a lot of people didn't like this one that much, but I just adore Cinder. But I just adore Scarlet and Wolf as characters, so I'm really happy to have this on my shelf. So the next book I picked up is a nonfiction book, and that is In Order to Live by Yeon-Mae Park. I probably said that wrong, but... So this follows Park's story as she escapes from North Korea and relocates. I'm not quite sure where she relocates to. I really don't know much about this book other than everyone just talks fantastically about it. Everyone just says it is absolutely a heart-wrenching but important tale to read, and I've seen a lot of people kind of like talk about just how fantastic it is, and when I saw it for super cheap I was like, well, obviously I gotta get it. And it's like a super nice floppy paperback, so I'm looking forward to picking this up at some point. I know it's probably gonna be heartbreaking to read, but yeah. So the next book I picked up is also, well, so I guess the previous one and the next two ones are actually all nonfiction, so... And that is Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates, not Lauren Bates. Ooh, I'm just on point with these names today. So I originally heard this talked about over on Whitney's channel from Witty Novels, and it had just been on my radar ever since. I saw it on Book Outlet for fairly cheap, much cheaper than I would have been able to buy it in the store, because this would have been $17, even though it is a tiny paperback, and that's not my cup of tea. So I really don't know too much about this story or this book other than I think it originally started as an online series where she just gathered stories from women who just talked about the everyday sexism that happened in their lives from a young age on, and it like a lot of things on the internet, it just blew up. It took off much in the same way that like People of New York has, except for I feel like this one's gonna be heart-wrenching to read, and I'm probably gonna relate to way more of these than I should, because just a lot of women experience sexism in many different forms from a very young age. While relatable, it'll also probably be hard to read at times. So I flipped through this book because it's not really a book you can spoil yourself on, and there are just like short little tweets that she puts in here, and I'll read one of them for you, and it just says, "Standing on a crowded bus in summer, a seated man puts his hand up my skirt. I shout for help and not a person responds." So those are going to be the kind of thing that are going to be in this. So like I said, it's going to be hard to read at times, but I think it is an important read. I hope I get out of this book what I'm hoping. That didn't even make sense, Cheryl. Today was probably not a day I should have started filming because I am just talking nonsensically, but here we are. So the last book is, like I said, also nonfiction, but kind of different than both of these, and that is Dark Matter and the Dinosaurs, The Astounding Interconnectedness of the Universe by Lisa Randall. Don't really know much about this book, but like, can we just like praise the fact that I got this nice hardcover for like $4? I love finding good deals on books, even though I don't really know much about it. But I'm assuming it's gonna have to do with like the space and cosmos and dark matter and dinosaurs, hopefully, because I love dinosaurs. So we will see when I get to this or what I think of it. So those are all the books I have to show you. There were quite a lot of them. I'm sure there's probably more on my shelf that I never hauled, but I bought just one or two at a time. I'm going to try to get better about like separating the books so I can do a haul video before putting them on my shelf, because once I put them on my shelf I always forget about them. And I know all of these library books are going to have to be returned, so they're not mine, so am I wrong for hauling them? I don't know. But anyway, that is my haul, as long as it was. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me to the end. What are some books you guys have hauled recently? Have you read any of these books? There are quite a few of them, and if so, what did you think of them? As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!